go back to the whole the men and women's sports. So we need that to happen here in Canada, that the men are invading. And I use the word men because we are biological men and coming into women's spaces and sports. Okay, so I'm not going to just limit it to sports. We're also talking about spaces such as prisons, crisis centers, shelters, bathrooms, locker rooms. Okay, this radical gender ideology, this needs to stop.
April, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
Sorry, I have a cat here. I'm doing really well, actually. I guess, the last month has been a little bit stressful. It's been very busy, very hectic. I think this week I've been a little stressed out, a little blah. I think just because of the change of the seasons, I know winter's coming. It's been a lot of stuff going on politically in the background. I'm just getting back to training again in the gym, which has been really good for my mental health. Thank God. But I felt like the little winter blues kind of creeping up on me. So I was getting like maybe teeny weeny depressed. So good thing I'm back at the gym, but really good. Had to take a little bit of a hiatus from online just because it was affecting my mental health a little bit. But all in all, I mean, I'm a pretty positive person. So I've been doing, the word would be okay right now. So.
Yeah. Okay. It's not, not bad and not great, but, somewhere in the middle. Yeah. To sort of jump in on just something you said there about being, online. Did you ever, it seems odd that you have to say that you're an advocate for female sports in 2024. Seems like that's not a thing that I would ever be considering having a podcast about. Just be like, that's just like normal shit that we should just do and say. But what about like you're in this position now, and we'll get into your story a little bit, but is this something you thought you'd be doing?
No, not at all. I never thought that I would be in this position. I was actually one of those tomboy girls growing up in high school that wanted to play with the boys all the time. I was the one fighting, to be on the boys' teams and saying, hey, we're just as strong, we're just as good. I was racing against the boys in public school. I was one of the fastest runners. And I was always the one saying, hey, we're just as good as you. And it's funny because now, the tables have turned and a lot of the men are blaming the feminists for what has happened now, which, I kind of hate to see that because honestly, men should be supporting the women, not blaming them. And they should be defending us and actually using their voices and defending little girls and making sure we're safe, right? So, anyways, no, I never thought I'd be here, but I honestly think this has been my role. Interesting story. I used powerlifting and sports to kind of keep me in line growing up and to help me with mental health and to help me actually and help save my life during my hard times in life and help me with my overcome addictions. And I talk about this all the time that I never thought that overcoming my addiction, getting into powerlifting, becoming a Team Canada powerlifter would end me up having such a huge role in an advocacy and a voice that I could be able to use it. And I do think God saved me for a reason to be able to sit here today and to fight for this. I'm over here in Canada, but I do have a huge voice in the USA and globally on this topic. I work a lot with Riley Gaines in the States, and I mean, it is simple. I did hear that 72% of the voters in the election the other day agree that men should not be in women's sports. Now, keep in mind, that's actually a pretty low number. You think it would be 99%.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the election, how are you feeling that Donald Trump got reelected?
Well, to be honest, myself posting a picture of myself supporting, or I guess not supporting, but endorsing Donald Trump here. I lost about whatever. I think it was like a small amount, maybe 200 followers. Unfortunately, politics really divides people, which is unfortunate. Because I'm very open. I'm very middle of the road. I'm very open to hear people's sides and have conversations about it. People know my stance. And the one thing I do love about Donald Trump is that he has said very adamant that he supports fairness in women's sports. He does not want men in women's sports or spaces. And if anyone knows me, they know that's what I fight for. Do I agree with everything that Donald Trump does? No. Any political leader. And but I think he's the lesser of all evils that was in the election. I think there could have been way better candidates for sure. But that's who we had. That's who USA had, was Kamala or Donald Trump. I do think, however, people were not just voting for Donald Trump. I think they were voting for his excellent team behind him. You had J.D. Vance. Look at Elon Musk. Like, you had such a strong team. Tulsa, like the whole team behind him. You had the Avengers team of, you know what I mean? So it just wasn't Donald Trump you were voting for. I think J.D. Vance is a very respectable man. And so it just wasn't Donald Trump. So I was actually very happy with the selection, because what happens in the USA is going to trickle down into Canada as well. And as you know, we have a very weak leader. We have Justin Trudeau, who has just torn this country apart, and we're just waiting for him to step down, which he won't. I mean, let's hope he does it sooner than later. But no, I was very, very happy that Trump got elected, for sure.
Yeah, another famous Canadian that I really admire is, Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he put out an amazing video, like psychologically analyzing every one of Trump's team members. It was quite a cool video, and he called them the Avengers or the X-Men or whatever. But I think people were, especially in America, are fired up by the fact that there's going to be a few different voices, people who used to be Republican or Democrat coming over, and just like hopefully hearing all of those sides and like actually being someone that unifies people. And then, like you said, hopefully it trickles down into Canada. What are you hoping to see happen there with a power change or anything like that, with the laws or things of that nature?
Well, the two main things that have been happening. So, like I said, I go back to the whole the men and women's sports. So we need that to happen here in Canada, that the men are invading. And I use the word men because we are biological men and coming into women's spaces and sports. Okay, so I'm not going to just limit it to sports. We're also talking about spaces such as prisons, crisis centers, shelters, bathrooms, locker rooms. Okay, this radical gender ideology, this needs to stop. And unfortunately, and I'm not talking about trans identifying individuals, because we're talking about the 80% of men with fetishes that are unfortunately ruining this for the true transsexuals and the true transgenders that literally just want to live their life and be left alone and just go on about their day. And I think that sucks for them, because I do have transgender friends who I love very much. And it's just unfortunate. I've just met through this whole advocacy a couple. I was just at the legislation here in Alberta, because they are actually passing law to protect women's sports and spaces eventually. And I met a few detransitioners who support this, transsexuals who support this, and my heart goes out to them. And they were actually standing up for this fight. And I said, thank you so much for using your voice. But they're gonna be looped into these men with fetishes. You know what I mean? So so there's that area. But what's happening here in Canada is that we are getting silenced. The women are getting silenced for speaking up. So it's the freedom of speech. And this is where, Elon Musk comes in, and this whole team that Trump has around them. People are getting censored. You can't say that, for example, a man or like that a trans woman is a man, you get shut down here in Canada. Like, it's literally
Mhm.
considered hate speech when you're literally talking facts and the truth. And that's what happened to me. I got suspended for 2 years in my powerlifting federation because I spoke the truth. Jordan Peterson left the university. He said, "You're not going to compel my speech," forcing us to use pronouns and calling a man a woman or vice versa because we're literally speaking science and biological facts. They're like, no, that's considered hate speech. That's the stuff that's going on right now, is
Mhm.
compelled speech and trying to silence us on platforms, in institutions, in workplaces, in government, and everywhere. So it needs to stop.
Yeah, I spoke to another woman from Canada called her name was Alicia Duncan, and
Yeah.
she's advocating for against MAID, medical assistance in dying. And when we were speaking on the podcast, there were certain words that she didn't want to say because then the video would be taken down on Canada's YouTube. And that
Yeah.
whole MAID thing is also another just unbelievable thing that's happening in Canada. It just seems, I don't know, it's just wild. But I just point that out to sort of reinforce your point about the speech and things of that nature.
Yeah, there's my friend, Amy Ham. She's a nurse in British Columbia. She got suspended from work because there was an anonymous complaint about her because she literally stated that she stood behind J.K. Rowling. All she said was she stood behind a picture that said, "I stand with J.K. Rowling." And she hasn't gone back to work. Like, they're trying to fire her because of her beliefs. Like, it's, there's no free speech here left in Canada. And it's ridiculous because it goes against, isn't religious views, isn't our creed also a human rights? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's yeah.
Well, you could sort of see this in sort of any domain of life, of like when you force people to do something, it's not well received, even if it has good intentions. Like, I can take a young kid, for example. Like, you should eat fruits and vegetables. It's good for you. But if I force you to eat them, my intentions might be pure because they're good for you. But there's no way that child is going to be receptive of those things because I'm forcing them basically down his throat. And that's the similar idea with some of these things. Like, people are a lot more accepting than you give them credit for with all sorts of different communities. But if I say, April, you fucking have to say this shit or you are done, like, you're going to be like, what do you mean I have to? Why can't I get to know this person? Why can't I talk to them and hear them and see them? And then I'm like, oh, they're like a real human that I actually like. Of course, I'm going to call them whatever they feel necessary. But there are certain things like fairness or inclusion. What's more important? But we can make that decision based on knowing the person, not being forced to have this pushed down my throat. And then that's where people start to push back, because then it's human nature to say, this doesn't make sense. But then you only have a select few people who actually get up on the front and stand up, while, some people don't, like, the men that you talked about who have daughters who should be fucking doing way more. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, that's just how my brain thinks about the situation.
Well, yeah, it's like the parents telling the kids, get up and do your homework, keep doing it, and like the kids are going to rebel, right? If you just give people the freedom, you're going to get a much better response. And I think that's the whole thing with that community or the society, is that it shows an awful lot of insecurity when you have to force someone. I talk about this, they need the validation constantly, right? And that's why I say there is a difference between true trans and transsexuals and this whole, like what Jordan Peterson calls them, narcissistic, mentally ill men. Okay, there's a huge difference. And I've been on Tammy Peterson's podcast a couple times. Love the Petersons. We're just so in sync. We just think the same. And it's like, and people could peg me off as transphobic. And I said, well, what is your definition of transphobic? Give me a definition. No one can ever define it for me. And I was just like, there's a difference. We're talking about men with fetishes and got autogynephilia. Okay. And then we have the two transgenders. And like I said, I'm friends with transgenders who support my advocacy. And again, There's some that just want to live their life. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But again, there's some that force it upon others and they make you say the language. Like, I have never used pronouns. And actually, the only time I have used pronouns and I found myself using them was with my friends who are transgender. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, I use them. But you know what? Probably because I'm very close to them and I care about them. I love them. And I'm just so used to being around them. So there you go. It's not like I'm 100% opposed to using them. But again, it's like that force thing. It's that insecurity. It's that control. And again, if you just lay off and just let us be human and again, not force yourself into the spaces, like, for example, in Canada, and I'm sure it happens in the USA, where they've taken away the female bathrooms and just let males in. Like, in the very beginning, we should always just kept the female only, have the male only, and having universal. It's just that they're now forcing females to share our spaces and our sports. But thank God we have legislation now being formed in Alberta, which I was at last week, where they're actually creating a female only. So only females registered at birth can compete in this female only category, male only, and then they're doing a co-ed league. And this is groundbreaking legislation. Globally, not even in the States, they'll have this, but I hope that Trump will be doing the same thing once he starts, moving things around there in the States.
Yeah, that's amazing, because some people's biggest contention with this subject matter is that it just affects such a small portion of the population. I think that's just like a bogus argument, because it doesn't. If it affects one girl, that means it trickles down into all these other females who may be convinced at a young age they shouldn't even start sports. Because why? What's the point? I'm just going to have to go against so maybe, yeah, the percentage is small now, but it grows as you continue to sort of avoid the conversation. But I think really good steps are being made now. The conversation it's much better. I think it was probably even when you started just a couple years ago, people are probably more receptive. But still, I don't really register with that argument. What do you think about it?
Well, so because I spoke up in my federation, so obviously, I don't know if everyone knows my story, but I spoke up about a male competing in my category, in the women's category. And the same male actually holds 3 out of the 5 records in the province of Alberta for the women's category. And he's actually ranked #1 in the world right now for the women's powerlifting category. So he still holds his records. They were never stripped away. But because I spoke up about this male competing, I was suspended for 2 years. So this is what's going on in Canada, is if you speak up about it, it's actually happening in the States too, because someone spoke up about the volleyball player and they got suspended. If we speak up about it, we get silenced. But because I did speak up, they actually changed the policy at an international and national level. So meaning any trans-identifying male now has to be submitted to testosterone monitoring, or he has to submit psychological records. But they still let males compete at a local level, which is completely wrong, because that means any little girl that starts off competing is going to be deflated and they're going to be defeated by a man. So why would any little girl in public school or as a teenager want to keep competing if they just keep going up to losing to a male? They're not going to want to keep continuing into sports. This is why this needs to start even as ages like in kindergarten up until grade 10, in high school and grade school. Boys should not be competing against girls. In schools, they need to educate kids on the differences, biological differences between boys and girls. They need to get rid of that sexualized crap that they're teaching these kids, completely take that out of the schools. Stop sexualizing the kids and start teaching the boys and girls the differences. Let's talk about chromosomes. Instead of sexualizing them, let's talk about chromosomes and the physiological advantages that boys have over girls. And Do not let girls compete against boys. That's what they should be doing at the grassroots.
Yeah, and highlighting the important differences that make each sex unique and valuable and awesome and great. And also, I want to point out that about that person that holds the record, the male, wouldn't they be like in the top 2,000 of male or male lifters?
6,000.
Not even 6,000. Excuse me.
Not even 6,000.
Holy cow! So number one with female biological male, and in the top 6,000 for his actual biology.
So I'll break it down to you. The bench press for the male is 368. So that's their bench press. So what's my bench? My top bench, and I've been working at it for a while, is 205. And I mean, women are designed to do bench press. We don't have the upper body muscle mass to do bench press. My starting deadlift is, I think, 405. His starting bench or his starting deadlift was like 540. So yeah, and his max deadlift is 585, close to 600. So, which is actually quite weak for a man, and that's why I'm saying he doesn't even rank 6,000 for the males. So it's a mediocre male that just wanted to transition over to the female.
Yeah, very interesting. Also, 200-pound bench press is hella strong. So we'll just put that out there. Especially when you guys do it, because you have to pause at the bottom. It has to be full control. They took away the arching shit, which is great, because some women are so like their fucking whole body. I feel like the top of their boobs are already at the bar. It's like crazy.
I'm almost 6 foot tall. So taller people are their tensions are never like the best when you're tall, but I have no chest. I was like, can I get some breast implants? Actually, I was like, can I get some free breast implants? Because that's another thing. I don't get free gender assignment surgery on taxpayers' dollars like that they do. So I was like, can I just get some free breast implants? And I don't arch. I'm not flexible. So I was like, and I have long limbs, so bench is always my worst. My deadlift was pretty good though. So
yeah, I mean, you still hold the North American record, don't you, for deadlift? Yeah, that's fucking cool. But anyways, okay, to backtrack a little bit, we sort of just dove in, which was awesome. But I really want to know more about your backstory, and I know you're 5 years sober-ish, I think. And take me back to before you got sober. What was your life like? What were you doing? Things of that nature.
So, I mean, my childhood was, I always thought my childhood was pretty normal, to be honest, pretty good. My dad was, I thought he was like my hero, like a pretty cool, like undercover, drug, like police officer on the drug squad. And like, I just thought he was the coolest guy in the world. My mom was just a stay-at-home mom. And, I have an older brother, 5 years older than me. But I was born into sports. Like I started sports when I was 5 years old. I was always into like skating, and I was into track and field, baseball, you name it. I probably played 5 sports every year. Now I grew up kind of like with alcohol around me, right? Just because of my dad being on the police force. To me, that was normal. Like everyone just kind of drank. Booze was always in the home and stuff like that. So, and then when I was 6 years old, I was actually sexually abused by my neighbor. And at that time, obviously, I didn't realize what he was doing was wrong. I thought, to me, in my eyes, what he was doing was forms of love. Like I thought it was, I just thought it was forms of him loving me. And at that time too, my dad wasn't really around because he was working a lot of overtime on the drug squad. But bless his heart, like he worked long hours just so he could pay for my sporting equipment, so he could take us to Disneyland, you know what I mean? So, and obviously my neighbor was like right there, right? Like he had a trailer in his driveway. That's where the abuse would happen, right? He would tempt me with candy and stuff and say, hey, come on into my trailer and stuff like that. So no one knew. It was a very ideal spot for him to take me to, right? So, and that abuse lasted for like probably a year or more. And after that abuse happened, I started becoming like very promiscuous in the neighborhood and with other kids and stuff like that. And I felt very like, I think I've talked about this in other podcasts. I started becoming very much like a tomboy. I didn't realize this until after all this stuff came out in the last couple of years with, you know, identity, gender and stuff like that. But I actually kind of turned myself into a little boy back then. Like I had my older brother and I kind of merged myself into identity of being a little boy because I thought my 6 or 7-year-old little brain thought, well, if I become a little boy, then men won't touch me anymore. I can't get hurt anymore, you know. And then I started going through puberty and developing. And even like stuff like when I got my period, I thought, oh my God, like that was horrific for me because I thought, oh, I'm turning into a woman now. And then boys are going to want to be with me. And like it was just so awkward, right? So that was like the worst time was actually when I hit 10 to 12, the awkward puberty years. But that's when I found alcohol. Because I mean, it was just so available to me. It was like, you know, kids who didn't steal alcohol from their parents' alcohol cabinet. So I started drinking, and then it got to the point where I was drinking, taking it to work, or not to work, sorry, to school. I was hiding it in my lockers. I was still very much playing sports, and I was always the MVP. Like I was playing basketball, I got MVP every year, but I was drinking. I was still able to be such a high level athlete, but still drinking on the side. Like everything I did involved alcohol. Like I can remember going rollerblading at night with my friends and having booze in my backpack, like taking a 6-pack with me. And I think by the age of 18, that's when I knew I was a full-fledged alcoholic because I would come home from school and do my homework and I would polish off like 2 bottles of wine before my parents even came home from work.
Wow.
So that was like the moment where I knew, and I think my parents kind of knew because all their wine was missing from the fridge. So and I think I entered my first rehab when I was 21 probably. And I mean, I'm kind of skipping over a lot of stuff, but I got into a lot of trouble. Like I'm talking like car accidents, trouble with the police, like just a lot of trouble, like relationships. I don't like to really dive into that because it's all moments that I'm not proud of. But there's a lot of moments in my life that I am proud of. I still was a great student. I, you know, did well in sports. I have great moments with my family and friends as well. So
When you were like in your 18, 19, 20 range, had you come to terms with your abuse, or was that still something you were trying to just, you know, hide with the alcohol, or is that something you knew had happened, or you'd sort of disassociated from that, or what was your feelings around that stuff?
no, when I was 16, I actually, for some reason, the trauma came up for me again, very much so. Most likely because I was starting to have relationships with boys, like with at that age. That's when I first had my first sexual encounter, which I hated. I actually hated sex for a very long time, and I was basically just doing it just to fit in, to be honest. I think a lot of women do that in general, just because they want to be validated and liked, and you know, hey guys, guess what? It's true. And so it brought up a lot of emotions for me. So I actually started seeing a therapist, and she suggested that I go to the police again and bring up the old file. And so I actually took my offender to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. So, which is actually a thing that women can do if it hasn't been 10 years after the offense has occurred. So it was actually just right before 10 years. So luckily enough, I hit right. I think it was like 9 years or something. So I actually took him to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. He didn't show up. He was served, but he didn't serve up. He didn't end up showing up. And I guess you don't have to show up. You can just get served and either go or not go. But the point is, he was made aware. And I just was given a monetary payout of like $10,000. So that's basically what that was. And then that really kind of made me more angry, the fact that he didn't show up and acknowledge it. So I ended up going to his house one night, I think when I was 20, and I was pretty drunk. He still lived in the same spot. He never moved. And I think I showed up at his house one night. I was dating a police officer at the time. And I just knocked on his door one night and I just screamed at the top of my lungs at him. I like just called him a pedophile and said, do you have any idea what you did? You just ruined my life. And I just cried and screamed at him. And he just stood there. And that actually made me feel a lot better doing that, going up to his door and telling him that. Because at least now he has to live with that. And I think he'll remember that till the day he dies, that he actually took a part of me and ruined part of my life. And, because in a sense, he's really, I'm not going to use the word messed me up, but he's stolen a part of my childhood. And for sure, I wonder, like, if that hadn't happened, what kind of woman would I be today? I surely would have gone down a different path in life, right? So, but I'm also very grateful how I've turned out, because I don't think I'd be sitting here and being an advocate for women, or I would never have gotten into powerlifting. I talk about this with Tammy Peterson, how God has used my experience and put me where I am today for a specific reason. So I'm a big believer in that, for sure.
Is this when did your dad find out about the abuse? Was this something he knew the whole time, or did he find out when you took him to this court? And what was his reaction to that? Did he blame himself for certain things, or?
Oh, my dad holds a lot of, I'm sure my dad and my brother, I'm sure, hold a lot of guilt. Probably because my dad wasn't around, right? And my dad, I think, being a police officer as well, right? And at the time of the offense, my neighbor was under 18. He was just shy of turning 18. So when the last incident occurred of him abusing me, which was probably like the worst of it, and that was what scared me, right? So it was a bunch of offenses that he did. I don't want to go into detail of what he did to me, but the last stuff that he did to me, it scared me. And I ran out of the trailer and I went and told my mom what he did to me. And my mom was like, oh my God. And she called the police. And then I was taken to the hospital. My dad rushed home and the police were coming over, but I was so scared, right? I was only a little girl and I just knew that I felt like I did something wrong. So I was crying, and I remember I was hiding under my bed and I was scared and I wouldn't come out from under my bed. So I couldn't do much, right? Like I wasn't going to speak. So it was only on like what my dad could talk to them about or what my mom could say, right? I didn't actually talk to the police. I was too scared. So they had, like when I went back 10 years later, they had all the notes. They had the doctor's report. They had the hospital report. They had everything on file, which is amazing. So that's all that could be done. And at that time, and Children's Aid Society was called, and they went over and talked to the family of my offender and talked to, so I don't know exactly what was done at that time. Like nothing was really done because he was underage. He was under 18. So
Yeah.
really nothing. You know what I mean? So like,
Wow.
I don't even know if he was made to do therapy work or what have you. So I know he just he didn't go to like young offenders or anything like that. So,
Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, leading up into the point where you started powerlifting. Let's get into some more positive now about your story and basically how you turned it all around. So you went to rehab, got sober, and then got sober because of the powerlifting. How does that all intermingle?
Yeah, so I drank up into the age of 40. Like I kept on drinking. I had like a career of drinking. I held a job. I was very much a functioning alcoholic up until I wasn't functioning. Until my doctor basically gave me like 2 years to live. I couldn't function and my body was shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, well, I can't keep working. I couldn't function. I was very, very sick. I actually just watched that movie. You know that movie, Leaving Las Vegas?
I've never
Um,
seen that.
oh, so it's like Nicolas Cage plays an alcoholic, but that was very much kind of like me. I was like basically living in my condo, drinking and just having seizures and shaking and having bad withdrawal. And I literally couldn't quit on my own. So I think you've seen other podcasts where I talk about my suicide attempts. Like I tried to commit suicide because I couldn't quit drinking, and I woke up in the ICU unit on a breathing tube, and that's when I decided that I need to get help, right? And that's when I decided that day in the hospital that I want to put myself into rehab. So I did the 30 days at Westover Treatment Center, and when I came out of Westover, it was right before COVID hit that I was like, I have to do something. So I just decided to start powerlifting, and I just started powerlifting like every day in my friend's garage, and just as a way to help me with my mental health and my addictions. And I then everything did close down, so there was no competitions to be had, and yeah, I trained 5 times a week up until 2020 was my first competition. And then when I came out, my first competition was regionals and I got gold medal. And then I went right to nationals, got gold medal. And then I went right to worlds. So quite a story because that usually doesn't happen. Usually you do a few competitions first and then go to nationals. But no, it was so exciting. Like it was, I actually since have quit powerlifting. Just because of their policies. But yeah, it was really much a great way for me to help with my mental health.
Yeah, but such a crucial and powerful part of your story. Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you so much because about sort of suicide and mental health, and I'll share a quick personal story with you here, April, since you got so open with us. But my sister Rachel in 2018 took her own life, and so I understand very personally sort of what it looks like to be in that place, to think that there's no way out. I can't do anything else. My family probably thinks I'm a burden and I've caused so much trouble and issue. And the best way forward in my own head right now is to take my own life. So I know what that looks like. My sister went through it. And obviously, as we all know, you're so better off here in this world living life because the wake of losing someone to suicide lasts forever, as I'm dealing with that for the rest of my life. And so I say that to say that I'm glad you're here. It's actually maybe you haven't realized it or not, but it's actually no small thing that you are here doing this thing. And Tammy Peterson was probably right when she said that God has something to do with it. Even Donald Trump said it like last night about his assassination attempt. There's just certain things that happen that are absolutely fucking miracles that are beautiful. And you still being here, along with anyone else who's attempted suicide and saw the light and continues to move forward, is a beautiful miracle. And so I just wanted to share that because, it means a lot to me. So.
Well, thank you. First. Oh, I'm gonna try not to cry here. No, it's funny. In my sobriety, I've had a lot of, and I talk about this too with Tammy, is that I've had a lot of I don't call them coincidences. I call them God incidences. And it's funny when you're awake, I call the word awake, right? But when you're in tuned with God, that like, obviously when I was using and drinking, I wasn't awake, right? I was just kind of going through life. I wasn't living. I wasn't aware. But now that I'm sober, I see all these little signs, right? Like whether it's like these dates, all these dates that have come up. I'm like, yeah, that's a weird thing. Like this date aligns with that date, or and like I said, I'm actually going to be posting a video with me and Tammy soon. And I said, isn't it weird how it really sucks about my abuse and my addiction, but like my abuse led me into my addiction. And then my addiction, like obviously, yeah, I tried to kill myself, but that led me into my rehab. And then my rehab led me into powerlifting. My powerlifting, what are the chances that I had to compete against a man? That all of a sudden that led me into my advocacy. I was like, what a whirlwind of events, right? And it's just like, but then like every day I get messages from girls saying, hey, thank you so much for using your voice, or fathers from saying, hey, you know what, my daughter really looks up to you. Thanks for using your voice. And, you know, even this last week, we're actually changing legislation to make safe spaces in sports for kids now. Like that's huge. And that's, you know, we're changing things now. And so I'm really sorry to hear that about your sister. Like, you know, and I hope you don't feel any guilt in that. And I mean, self-forgiveness is the hardest thing in the world to do, and I'm still working on that myself. So
Yeah. Most days are quite good for me. I have really strong, fond, beautiful memories of my sister. Like she was an amazing big sister, much more passionate and kind and compassionate than I might ever will be. So I try to possess that every day, especially when I'm speaking to people. And I have some interesting feelings on sort of the same sort of journey that you've been through about some of the experiences that led us to where we're at. Like, and I don't know if I can use the word grateful. I just have I have like an ick about it because I'm not grateful, right, that my sister is not alive, but I'm grateful for what has happened because of it. And so I don't know if those things intermingle well, because obviously I would take her back in an instant. Obviously your situation is different than mine, right? But still pain caused us to change and grow and all of that. But I couldn't be more excited to be able to do this, like to have these conversations. And it would have never happened if I had never seen some of that darkness. And so I think about sort of that dichotomy a lot, but it is very, interesting how we land in certain places. Again, like you said, if we're open to it, we have to be awake to the idea. We have to walk through that door. We have to have the courage to move through that door, because many people, almost everyone, probably has the opportunity to do something great, and everyone is capable of doing something great. But some people just don't walk through that door. And I wish they would, because they have so much to offer to the world. And so that's sort of how I think about it.
yeah, I think this is kind of your way of healing too, and self-forgiveness, because you could be a very angry and bitter person, but you've decided to do something very positive and help people. And in turn, I do believe this is kind of your sister with you by you doing this positive, because you know what I mean? Because I'm sure, and I don't know her, she would want you to do something like this. I mean, this is God's work by you doing something very positive and helping others. That is God's love. So,
yeah. Yeah, and in the same way as you, working out and sports have been sort of everything for me. I coach baseball now. I coach young kids in baseball. And just having something to pour your energy and heart into is incredible. And working out and all of that stuff has been a cornerstone of my life. And so I'm glad that, that's part of your story as well. And so let's work back into basically today. What's happening right now? What are your most pressing issues? What are you trying to still accomplish in terms of, advocacy for women in sports?
So right now, like I said, I just came back from Alberta, which is one of the provinces here in Canada that is, I guess, more ahead of the game in Canada. They've just passed the first reading for implementing obviously a female-only category for sports. Also, no puberty blockers for children under 16, no gender assignment surgeries for under 18, also for no pronoun usage in schools without parental consent. So this is wonderful. So we're just basically going back to the old days, the way it used to be. This is great. And so what I'm hoping for, and after this, I'm going to give it a couple of months for, the protests to kind of, simmer down. And then I'm going to be working with a group of women to basically start working with our premier here in Ontario, because I know that other provinces in Canada are watching Alberta to see how it pans out. And so we want all of Canada to get on board with this legislation. Right now we have Justin Trudeau as our leader. We are basically, even his own party is asking him to step down. He has been horrible for women's rights. He basically has stated that, trans women are women, which we know is false. So he's just, he's a very weak leader. So we just want to have Pierre Poilievre step in and take control. He's a conservative. He'd be much better for the country. So political wise, Canada's a little bit of a mess. We don't have free speech, and we have a lot of stuff going on right now. But I'm just continuing to be an advocate, basically. And just tour around. I do a lot of speeches. I go out to not so much universities, but I do a lot of group chats. I get hired to go to functions, mostly conservative functions, but basically just kind of keep pumping out the information, right? I have a big kind of following online. That's about it. I have my new merchandise line on my website. I sell obviously these hats, the XX chromosomes. A lot of people are like, what does XX stand for? I'm like, really? But it's a good conversation piece. Because my dad actually ordered this hat for his golf team. Dad. And he goes, oh, I love it. I'm like, because I go, Dad, you're going to have to explain to them what the XX means, right? He goes, no, I love it. I'll get a good conversation going. I'm like, cool, whatever you want. But I actually sell XY, toques, XY gear as well. And then I have my Save Women's Sports and Spaces hoodies. I actually just put out a new t-shirt because of the election in the States. I have the Make North America Great Again t-shirts.
There we go.
Canada is happy about the whole Trump elections. We love that. So we got to make, the two countries together great, because we're very happy about Trump getting in, because, well, let's be honest, it's a good team. So.
And just for those Americans listening, a toque is a beanie, just in case anyone was wondering.
Yeah. Is that a Canadian thing?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. It is, yeah.
Oh, so a toque, yeah. So we sell, we sell beanies that.
Yeah, it's all good, yeah.
Because
they're great. I went to college in South Dakota, and so I played with a lot of Canadians came down to play, and that's where I heard the first usage of toque, which I think is a great word. Didn't know what it meant in college, but now I know obviously it's a beanie. So some people may not have heard that. So we'll just make that clarification.
And so I guess another thing that I would say is A. Have I said A lot? A?
Not like an aggressive amount by any means. No, no, it's been good. But thinking about Trudeau, he's the definition of how dangerous a weak man can be. Because Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot, right? People are always scared of this weird, toxic masculinity trait, but you should be way more afraid of a weak man, because he's dangerous and willing to do whatever. And I think that's also the issue with fathers not standing up for their daughters in this sort of thing, like standing back and thinking someone else will do it. No, you have to do it. This is your daughter going into a space that could potentially be very, very, very harming, sort of, like the situation that you were in when you were a young person. That could happen. Not to say it's happening all the time, but even just the thought of it happening would make me explode. Like, I just got married, and my wife and I, hopefully, God willing, will have a child soon. And if I'm a dad to a young girl, like, these things are going to come up for me. You know, maybe it'll be different in 5, 6, 7 years. Like, cool, that'd be awesome, where we don't have to have this fight anymore. But I can't imagine just standing back and being like, nah, fuck it, it's all good. Just go in there, change clothes with each other.
Aaron, let me break it down. So I don't know what you have a lot of males listening to your show. So I'm a little, I guess you call what as like I'm a tomboy. Okay, so for me to be an advocate, I'm not even a feminist. Okay, so I get this all the time where men always chime in and go, "You feminists, you created this problem," and I was like, first of all, I'm not even a feminist. I'm just a tomboy that used to play sports. I can wear lipstick. I can wear dresses too. I flip-flop back and forth. I'm just a woman that protects women and children. Guess what? Men should be doing that. What's the role? Remember the old saying, women and children first? Remember that old craze? Remember that was back in the war times, women and children first. Let's get them off the boat. Women and children. Like, men should be protecting women and children even more so than women could be. And in Canada, specifically in Ontario, we have a male rugby player who got voted the hardest hitter on the men's rugby team that just switched over and went on to the women's team that now plays on the women's team with 18-year-old girls. He now goes into the change room with the girls and no one says anything. We also have a 42-year-old male who identifies as a 12-year-old girl and goes into the little girls' change room and changes with the little girls when there's also a family bathroom right next door, and he goes in with the little girls. So when I go around and I talk to people and do my speeches, I always end my speeches with this. Where are all the real men that are standing up for their daughters? You're not going to get arrested if you stand in front of that locker room and say, no, you're not going into that change room with my little girl. Or don't even do that. Take your little girls out and say, you know what, Hannah, you're not going to go into the change room today. I'm going to take you to the family room. You got to defend your little girls. It's the right thing to do. It doesn't make me a feminist. So stop blaming and pointing fingers, because that doesn't help this whole situation by blaming others. It's true what Jordan Peterson says. There's a lack of maturity out there and just in relationships in general, but there's a lack of real men. And I think it's very misogynistic. I almost think that some men have had negative experiences with women, and that's why they like to put the blame on women. Just please stop doing that. You know, just don't bring your internal feelings out, even if you don't like women or what have you, whatever the case is. This is about protecting children first and foremost, even little boys. Like, it just, or just in children in general. But it just stop blaming people. Just let's all work together. And it's about safety, right? It's about safety is number one, and then it's about fairness in sports. And like, I'm all for what Jordan Peterson says. It's just. That's why I actually added, there's a hoodie you can get on my website. I just added it like last week, and it says, real XY, protect real XX. Because that's my number one thing is like, there's no men standing up. They're just sitting back going, well, let's just let the women, like, they created this. Let's let the women take care of this. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You said if you have a little girl, you would let her go in there with the boy, with the man, right? Like,
there's no fucking way. And if I was letting it, I would have someone that I know punch me in the fucking face and say, Aaron, wake up. Why is your little girl in there with a grown ass man? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, so guys have to take personal responsibility. That's all it is. Like, yeah, yes, there can be a certain amount of guys who feel disenfranchised by women because they're not getting what they want. Like, there's a whole different conversation about dating and women and sex and all that. But right now, this is important, about you taking responsibility for the world you want to live in. And if we don't want these bad things to happen, and we want children to be safe and grow up great and have the ability to blossom into themselves, then we have to protect them in certain ways. Like there can't be the bubble society. That's a different thing too. But these are certain situations where we can protect them. We can do something about it, so they're not getting physically, emotionally, and spiritually harmed in the process of them developing. And if you just sit back and assume someone else is going to do it, then you could look at every problem that way, and then nothing ever gets resolved and nothing ever gets changed. You can step up to the plate. You can. Yeah, you might fall flat on your face or do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. That doesn't matter. At least you're stepping up and trying and swinging the bat and swinging the bat and swinging the bat. And I think that's important to take away from sort of any issue that you find, that you feel in your gut that's important to you. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Like I went, I don't agree obviously with men and women's spaces, but for example, I went to this event in Alberta 2 weeks ago, and there was a transsexual there who actually supports no men and women's sports. Okay. They were there as one of the guests. And there was also, I was very confused. There was also a man there. Okay. I didn't notice him till later, but he was a man with 5 o'clock shadow, with long hair, big muscles. He was about 6'4", wearing a tight blue dress. Okay, hair on his arms, and he was there in support as a guest with this legislation. So we have a transsexual who looked like a woman. I wouldn't even know if it was a man. And then we have a man, kind of looked like you, wearing a tight blue dress. Both, okay, no joke, but with long hair. Obviously a man. And the guy came up to me and said, "Oh, hi, April." Shook my hand. "Oh, I'm a huge fan of yours." So I shook his hand, and I was still very curious as to why he was there. And then I talked to the transsexual, who's very supportive and very much an advocate. And I was like talking to, I'll say him because it is a biological him, but very nice person. And then as the time went on, the man in the dress, I was eating beside him, and he said to me, "I'm going to go use the little girl's room," out loud on purpose for me to hear. And I said, "Did you just really say that?" So he said it on purpose for everyone to hear that. Okay. And then I said to someone, "Who invited this guy? Like, why is he a guest here today?" And then as time went on, the legislation gets passed. We're there. And then later on that night after the restaurant, we're all celebrating, and he's at the restaurant. And there was about 5 of us, and some of them were feminists. Not me, but I was with some of my friends who were feminists, and we watched this fellow get up from the table and walk right into the women's bathroom. And I'll tell you, some of those feminists almost got up and walked right into that bathroom. And I'll tell you, it took all my courage to sit down and not go in there and just scream and say, "Get the F out of that bathroom." I bit my tongue. But did I ever investigate and find out who that person was? Because if I wasn't there on a, I guess, what's it called, a formal invite by the government and this and that, I would have literally gone in there and kicked that person right out and told them what I thought of them. Mm-hmm. And I still am thinking about putting a complaint in. Now, that's the difference between someone that has autogynephilia and a fetish, because they were getting off on that because they were making it very vocal, than the other person who was a transsexual that was going about their business, that was being very quiet and not making a scene, okay? Not saying that both of them belong in the space, because they don't. They're both men. They do not belong in women's spaces. But I'm telling you, 80% are men with fetishes. And this is what we have to be very careful about. And this is why men need to step up and protect their little girls. Be very careful, right? So I'm just giving you that as an example, because a lot of it, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And to sort of wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to share that I might have missed, or that seems important, or anything you want to point people to, or anything like that?
I don't think anything in particular. I think just like the most important thing, I mean, that I stress when I do my speeches is that the importance of speaking up. And, I had policies changed. I've had DEI policies changed because I used my voice. People are quite shocked when they hear that. And I was like, well, no, I've had things forced upon me. And I said, that's not right. I also have human rights. I have religion is also a human right. Um, so, I mean, sex is also protected. Here in Canada, they put gender identity in as a protected human right. Well, guess what? Sex is also, so is religion. So don't just stand by and put your blinders on and follow the sheep. Make sure you challenge policies, whether it's in your workplace or just out wherever you are. Because I had my federation policy page because I challenged it and I used my voice. So please, people, please use your voice. Please challenge policies. Please speak up and go to my website, which is www.aprilhutchinson.com. There you can find information. You can follow me. You can subscribe to my newsletter. But you can also buy like one of my t-shirts that basically says, save women's sports and spaces. There's stuff there for men as well. But if you buy a t-shirt, which I wear them all the time, you can be a walking billboard. You don't even have to open your mouth. You can literally just walk around wearing a t-shirt. Because I tell you, anytime I wear it, I get high fives. I get thumbs up. I wear my stuff to the wokest farmers markets in town, and I still have people going, I love your t-shirt. Where can I get it? So, it's awesome. But I would just say speak up. Please speak up because it's so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, April. I appreciate you, appreciate your work, and lovely chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for connecting with me, Aaron. I really love chatting with you as well.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.